And welcome back to ABC 13 Weather Now. And we are now joined by Houston Chronicle meteorologist Justin Ballard. And we have some breaking news to talk about with Hurricane Beryl. And now, after each hurricane season, forecasters with the National Hurricane Center, they do a debrief of sorts of all of the storms that were in the previous season. And in their reanalysis of Beryl, they found enough evidence to make Beryl nearly, it wasn't, but nearly a Category 2 storm. So Justin, that's what we're talking about today. At least a Category 2 storm at landfall. That's what we should say in Southeast Texas, because we know Beryl was a Cat 5 in the Caribbean. So first things first, why is this change and reanalysis important?
Well, it's important because think about how busy we all are as meteorologists during the event. There's no way we're able to get all the information that we need to get kind of collected, you know, in real time, really.
Yes.
So all of this kind of post-mortem analysis during the off season for the National Hurricane Center forecasters is important because it allows them to take in more data and really see that post-analysis happen every single year. So the National Hurricane Center found higher winds at landfall when Beryl came ashore. Beryl's top winds were about 10, 12 miles higher than kind of operational forecasts or you know, what we were kind of seeing in real time during Beryl had. So that's 3 miles per hour shy of Category 2. Now, in the grand scheme of things, our impacts probably wouldn't have changed if it were a strong Cat 1 versus a weak Cat 2, but still something to kind of keep an eye on. And some of the findings of the track were that overall, the track and forecast were both pretty accurate, which is not always, you know, the easiest to kind of pin down throughout the course of a hurricane.
Right, and that was the thing where I know that since Beryl intensified just a few hours before landfall, I think this is what we're moving on to next, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. What did the sea surface temperatures near the coast have to do with any of that? Did they have a role?
Oh, they absolutely did. Not only did they have a role in, you know, kind of intensifying those, the effects, the winds of Beryl. You see the intensity forecast there. They did struggle in the main development region a little bit, and that's because it was so anomalously early in the season.
It was.
If you recall, you know, late June into early July, those forecasts, though, did improve elsewhere in the basin, including the intensification near the Texas coastline. Let's talk about that intensification. This is obviously not Beryl, right? This is not real-time data, just so we're clear. But why did Beryl intensify? And part of it is something called the brown ocean effect. I was talking with Tim Cady at the National Weather Service down in League City yesterday, and he was kind of explaining this to me. It's a phenomenon I wasn't terribly familiar with, but basically where Beryl made landfall, really marshy, soils are very saturated, and that can help to kind of almost feed the hurricane and intensify it a little bit. So Beryl actually intensified slightly after it made landfall, which is not something, you know, we think about that often, right, with landfalling hurricanes. So really interesting findings from the National Hurricane Center in that post-Beryl report.
Right, and that makes sense in a way to see that intensification right after landfall. I mean, that was something we were seeing in real time, more so how Beryl was able to stay a Category 1 storm as it approached the city of Houston after it made landfall. I mean, hurricanes, they like warm water and they like little wind shear. So if we had that right at landfall, it's not a surprise to me that in a marshy area that has warm water near the ground, that would happen.
Another thing, you know, Beryl was speeding up a little bit in forward movement. It's about 5-6 miles per hour, which if you're on the interstate, it's not that much, right? But when you're talking about these systems that are so large, it takes a long time for them to kind of put on the brakes.
Right. So to clarify for everyone, what is the new official wind speed designation for Beryl when it made landfall in Southeast Texas?
Highest wind speed's 92 miles per hour right there along the coast.
Right. And then
up from 80.
Up from 80. And then can you explain a little bit why it took Beryl a long time to wind down after landfall? As we just mentioned, Beryl stayed very strong moving into the city of Houston, and though it moved quickly once it made landfall, thankfully it was still a Category 1 hurricane for several hours after landfall.
Part of it's that forward speed. So when it started speeding up, it just kind of takes a little while for those winds to spin down.
Yes.
On top of that, it started intensifying about 6 hours or so before landfall. Had it started intensifying sooner, we could have probably been dealing with a category higher or more of Beryls.
Beryl ran out of room.
Yeah,
and we liked that.
Yes,
that was great. Well, what is your main takeaway from Beryl? What are you taking away from that storm as we look ahead to next season?
The main takeaway from Beryl and as we go forward is, you know, when we're looking at forecasts, we have to look kind of at probabilistic sort of standpoint. So what are the chances chances that we'll see X number mile per hour of winds. That really helps to paint a big picture, and the National Weather Service said they're kind of pivoting towards that probabilistic sort of way of thinking in the future.
That's good to know. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for joining us today. I know y'all want us to stop talking about Beryl, but if you go to, of course, the Houston Chronicle, Justin has the latest on these updates about Beryl, and of course the report as well that was just released from the National Hurricane Center.
This is the last time I'll mention Beryl.
Okay, good to know, good to know. Me too. Now